You share 98.8% of your DNA with a chimpanzee. Not 50%, not 70%, 98.8%. The genetic difference between a human and a chimpanzee is 10 times smaller than the difference between a mouse and a rat. And yet we look completely different. We live completely different lives. So how did two creatures this genetically similar end up so apparently different? And what does being this closely related to another animal actually tell us about ourselves? Let's start with what the science actually shows. DNA is the instruction manual for building every living thing. It is made up of four chemical letters, A, T, C, and G, arranged in sequences of billions. When scientists compared the human genome to the chimpanzee genome, they found that out of every 100 letters, only about one or two are different. That 1.2% difference sounds small, but across 6 billion DNA letters, it still adds up to around 35 million individual differences. Most of those differences are completely silent. They change nothing visible or functional. But a small number of them, a very specific handful, are responsible for almost everything that makes us human. Now let's talk about how this closeness came to be, because 6 or 7 million years ago, there was no distinction between us. Humans and chimpanzees both descended from a single common ancestor species that lived in Africa around 6 to 7 million years ago. That ancestor was neither a human nor a chimpanzee. It was something in between, an ape that would eventually give rise to both lineages. Around 6 million years ago, climate changes in Africa caused forests to fragment. Some populations stayed in the forests, others moved out onto the open savanna. The forest dwellers became what we now call chimpanzees. The savanna walkers, over millions of years of evolution, eventually became us. 6 million years of separate evolution. And yet we are still 98.8% identical. Which tells you something profound about how slowly DNA actually changes. Now let's talk about what we share beyond the DNA, because this is where it gets truly fascinating. Chimpanzees use tools. They select specific sticks to extract termites from mounds. They use stones as hammers and anvils to crack open nuts. They pass these tool-using techniques down to their children through observation and teaching, generation to generation. This is culture, not instinct, not programming. Learned behavior passed down deliberately. Chimpanzees grieve. When a member of their group dies, they stay near the body. They go quiet. They show signs of mourning that scientists find remarkably human. They form deep long-term friendships. They support allies in conflicts. They reconcile after fights, sometimes with a hug or a gentle touch. They show empathy. They have been documented helping unrelated individuals, other chimps and even human strangers, at personal cost to themselves. Primatologist Frans de Waal spent decades studying chimpanzees and concluded that emotionally and socially, their psychology is very similar to humans. They feel jealousy. They feel pride. They experience something that looks very much like joy and something that looks very much like depression. Now let's talk about the differences, because they matter just as much as the similarities. The single biggest difference between humans and chimpanzees is not physical. It is the size and complexity of our brains. Specifically, the human prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, abstract thinking, language, and long-term reasoning. Chimpanzees cannot plan years into the future. They cannot imagine abstract concepts. They cannot build on accumulated knowledge across generations at the scale we do. Language. Chimpanzees can learn to use symbols and signs, but they cannot produce or process the complex grammatical language that humans use effortlessly. And walking. Chimpanzees can walk upright, but it costs them far more energy than it costs us. Our bodies evolved specifically for efficient long-distance bipedal movement. That ability to walk efficiently freed our hands permanently, and free hands changed everything about what humans could build, create, and achieve. Now here is the part that genuinely surprises most people. From a chimp's perspective, we are their closest living relatives. Not gorillas, not any other ape, us. If a chimpanzee could study phylogenetics, it would classify humans as a type of great ape, which technically, biologically, we are. We tend to think of ourselves as separate from the animal kingdom. Biology disagrees. Now let's talk about what studying chimpanzees has taught us about ourselves, because this is where the science gets extraordinary. By studying how chimpanzees fight disease, scientists have discovered genes that protect against malaria, the same genes found in both chimps and humans. Understanding chimp genetics is helping scientists understand human diseases, Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, because our underlying biology is so similar. Studying chimp social behavior has helped scientists understand the evolutionary roots of human violence, cooperation, fairness, and empathy. Everything chimps do that mirrors us reveals something about where our behavior came from. Before language, before culture, before civilization. Now here is something that changes how you think about the whole question. The question is not really why are chimpanzees so similar to us? The question is, why are we so different from them, given how little our DNA actually diverged? A tiny number of genetic changes, in the right places, produce language. Abstract thought, accumulated culture, civilization itself, that is what makes the human story so remarkable. Not that we are so different from chimpanzees, but that we are so similar, and yet something small changed everything. Chimpanzees are our closest living relatives because we share the same ancient ancestor, a creature that walked this earth 6 million years ago and gave rise to both lineages. I